We have about 11 more minutes. So I'm going to start at the bottom of page 124, the last paragraph. Indeed, this is a crisis of imperialism. It is also a moment when the possibilities of a new imperialist world war are greater than ever. Extremely significant economic interests are at stake. Bloodthirsty imperialist predators are willing and capable of mobilizing the oppressed of the world to fight other oppressed peoples to their collective extinction in the interest of protecting imperialism. So we end up fighting and killing ourselves. The only people left are going to be the white people and what it is they do. Trump's moves to normalize relations with Russia, China, and Korea are being met with efforts to derail negotiations by an assortment of political forces, even within the Trump administration. Let me back up for a moment, because I passed over rather quickly the significance of the African People Solidarity Committee and the work that we're doing in the white world itself. And that's extremely important. It has deep and profound significance depending on our success with this project, depending on the science and art that exemplify in this process. Because what it does is it denies the white world the absolute solidarity and unity with imperialism. Up until if we were not there, you'd be having a white world that has absolute solidarity with imperialism. I'm not saying that they're not going to be pacifists who don't like war and others who really remember fondly the old African nanny who used to take care of them when they were children and therefore sympathetic or something to that effect. They may still exist, but it's only the existence of the party and the African People Solidarity Committee that we have created, depending on our success in clearly defining and understanding the political trajectory and the ideological implications of what it is that we do at any given moment, that will deny white power the absolute solidarity of white people in this process that could lead to the extinction of other people who will fight to destroy ourselves, and the white people who want to be on the right side. We give them the means through which they can do this, not just their own subjective feelings about black people and how much they like jazz or something like that. But there is an avenue, a way that they can participate in changing the world that changes their relationship to the world in the process of destroying a dead, foul social system that can liberate humanity and gives them thereby the opportunity to join the rest of humanity as opposed to being living outside of the rest of humanity, trying to protect some white interests of their own. Anyway, so the connected internationally with state institutions of imperialist powers of other countries is generally committed to an Atlanticist strategy. The U.S. North American state, imperialist state, connected internationally with state institutions of imperialist powers of other countries, is generally committed to an Atlanticist strategy with a huge political and military economy revolving around it. So it's not just let's get along and have, there's a military, political, and economy revolves around this relationship. It's been developed over 70 years. Paychecks, what do you call it? Retirement funds for ordinary people, and of course the billions and trillions of dollars that goes to the bourgeoisie are tied up in this relationship. So it's not to say that the end of this relationship is the destruction of capitalism, but it is destruction of the way of life for a certain sector of the bourgeoisie. It destroys an arrangement that has existed up to now. It's almost like throwing anarchy into this mix in terms of what the outcome is going to be. There are Atlanticists within the Democratic and Republican parties, and also within the Trump regime, whence several attempts to block Trump's move with Russia, China, and Korea have originated. Some of the attempts to block what Trump is doing have originated inside the Trump administration itself. The efforts by Trump's Vice President Michael Richard Pence and U.S. National Security Advisor John Robert Bolton to scuttle the U.S. Democratic People's Republic of Korea summit are examples. Bolton and Pence, who is the vice president, did stuff to make sure that the People's Democratic Republic of Korea would be unable, have very serious difficulties coming into this relationship Trump was trying to make. Because they started raising, that they wanted it to be just like what happened in Libya. And everybody knows what happened with Libya, how the U.S. defanged Gaddafi and then unleashed this whole thing that resulted in overthrowing the government and the murder of Gaddafi himself. They publicly made those statements, knowing what implications it would have in Korea. The Atlanticists do not represent some kind of mysterious secret society. This is not, what do you call them, the Illuminati nonsense. This is real. They are openly written and spoken of often in authoritative bourgeois media outlets, including political opposites like the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. Protect and advance capitalist interests redefined by the outcome of the war. And the capitalist agenda was redefined by the outcome of the Second Imperialist War. And that must be understood too. This happens from time to time. We've seen various kinds of treaties redefine the capitalist agenda. We saw it even before. We saw it, in Berlin. We saw it with the 1894-95. We saw it with the Versailles Treaty. We've seen it in other instances than those I've just mentioned. Almost all the economic and political relations in the world were organized around, influenced, or driven by the intra-capitalist hegemonic authority of the Atlanticists. Didn't mean that all of them agreed with the Atlanticists. There were forces who didn't agree with it, the Atlanticists, for a number of reasons. I would say ideological, but the ideological reasons were based primarily on the economic interests as they perceived them. And these were sectors of the bourgeoisie. The Atlanticists have historically defined the security interest of imperialism. The influence of the Atlanticists reaches down into the retirement funds and job security of the hired killers that make up the officers and ranks of the U.S. military, the FBI, CIA, NSA, local cops, and other terrorist organizations of the imperialist gendarme. The Trump candidacy sounded so outlandish to many. Remember how crazy Trump sounded? Trump crazy. You know why it sounded crazy? Because it sounded so outlandish to many because his articulations challenged the long-held Atlanticist assumptions fed to the general public and regurgitated by every so-called legitimate political hack on both sides of the ocean. Trump said it made no sense at all. It's crazy. Do you remember how the bourgeoisie defined our land reform campaign that we were running in Oakland, California? They didn't want to debate what we said. They just said, how they characterize it as sheer what? Sheer insanity to actually think that the people should have control of their land, their houses, and be able to vote what's going to happen with slumlords and put caps on the amount of money they would pay for rent. Sheer insanity. Don't debate it. It's crazy, right? That was the line that they put forth. And this is what's happening with Trump, because you get so accustomed to understanding the world a particular way, anything comes different, can be defined as crazy and to be heard as crazy. What soon became clear after the 2006, this is what I was attempting from time to time to help people in our own party understand. Oh, Trump crazy, Trump crazy. And he may be crazy. I don't know if Trump is crazy. I haven't seen anything that
indicates that he's crazier than other white people who rule the world. I mean, what he says goes. I mean, he's got power, he's got the guns, he's got the drones, he's got all this other stuff, and he's got the media, all of them. And you don't see a single instrument of the media, even though they challenge Trump. They don't. What of them have you ever heard saying that Trump is the idea of attacking Iran is wrong? They don't say it's wrong. They might say it doesn't make sense because we can't win. Which of them have said that stop starving and brutalizing the people in Venezuela? Not a single one, Democrat or Republican. You haven't even heard Bernie Sanders say anything about that. Which of them have you heard saying stop killing all the people in Yemen? To some extent, every now and then they say it makes us look bad, but they're all on the same camp. It's not like they got some great difference there. And so Trump crazy. No, Trump has the same kind of insanity that a fox has for eating a chicken. And a fox might go about it differently than a wolf, but both of them want chicken dinners. Both of them hang out at KFC. So even if they may have different approaches to it, they are involved in the same project, same process. I have that issue with meat eaters. You mean they eat cats? Well, once you start eating animals, it seems to me, this whole distinction between a cat and a cow, that's, really subjective and personal. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So what soon became clear after the 2016 U.S. presidential election is that the intra-capitalist struggle for control of the state was not resolved. Remember, that's what we said, that's what it was about? We said that this campaign, that electoral process, is a nonviolent contest between contending sectors of the bourgeoisie for control of the state. But we're saying that what soon became clear after the 2016 presidential election is that the intra-capitalist struggle for control of the state was not resolved. Trump, an outlier who, that could mean a couple of things, but it's spelled differently. It should be spelled out, L-I-A-R. But Trump, an outlier who contended in the electoral process without economic and political support, without substantial, without initial, economic and political support from and general unity with the Atlantists, had become at least nominal custodian of the U.S. colonial capitalist state. I'm gonna have to end shortly. I'm gonna just use a couple more minutes. This is a crisis on steroids, not because Trump wasn't an anti-capitalist or anti-colonialist, but because he was not bound by the strategic trajectory that held the capitalists together even when they were in friendly contention. Trump's ascension to the presidency and his actions since then represent the first all-out assault on the very foundations of Atlanticism, which again achieved its rationale and definition in opposition to Soviet Russia. So you have to know the whole story. That's why we can say that the present has been made pregnant by the past with the future. You can't just open the book in the middle and think you understand something because you start here. You got to understand the history of this whole process that brought you to this place. That's what African internationalism, historical materialism does. That's why we come to this approach differently. And the other thing that makes us come to this approach differently is that this memory is lodged in the brain, if you will, the DNA, if you will, of the African People's Socialist Party itself, which has a history that is more than 40 years long. So it's not like it's a new organization that's come into existence. We've been going through these struggles around these questions for more than 40 years, 45 years or so. We've been struggling around these same questions and watching them mature, develop, recede, progress, et cetera, and this is what makes up who we are and how we understand this question and how we should take it on. This is why we're having this discussion right now. So we say that Trump has attacked the relevance of NATO and the United Nations, engaged in flirtations with Russia, and has demanded that the traditional U.S. allies begin to pay their way militarily and renegotiate their trade relations with the U.S. These are not merely the egotistical rantings of a billionaire simpleton. These are not merely the egotistical rantings of, not to say that there's not egotistical rantings. These are not merely the egotistical rantings of a billionaire simpleton. They represent an attempt at a major reorganization of international white power and America's place in it. So you should look at this, because we even talk about what people are seeing this stuff with the Mueller and the firing the head of the FBI and changing the head of the CIA and the head of his security advisors and all of this kind of stuff, the struggles inside the Trump administration itself, and have not necessarily understood what it is they're looking at. You can understand it within the context of this discussion and this chapter that we're looking at, chapter 4, The Deepening Crisis of Imperialism from Vanguard. And this political report that we're reading for, or this book that we're reading for, is a political report that came out of the 7th Congress of the African People's Socialist Party. And the thing that makes that significant is the African People's Socialist Party is an organization that is involved in a struggle to really overturn our relationship with imperialism and destroy imperialism itself. We have determined some time ago that it is possible for human beings to live in a different kind of world where we're not always brutally living in the most brutish kinds of circumstances. People in Africa, people in Asia, people in the Americas and other places living dirt poor, sometimes eating dirt, living in horrible circumstances, brutality, a prominent main feature of their existence, ignorance that's imposed on them from outside, because the kind of social system they live within cannot exist unless they maintain the vast majority of the peoples of the world living in ignorance, living in poverty, living in states of desperation, disease, and the rest of it. It is a condition, the condition for the continuing existence of this social system. And that's the thing that African internationalism and historical materialism teaches us, and that we hate this system. And we believe that there has to be some unity between practice and theory and practice, if you believe this. And also, because we are dialecticians, we understand that things are in a constant state of motion. You can't always pick what you're going to do and when you're going to do it. You have to be able to take advantage of circumstances that open themselves up to the revolution, up to the possibility. The vast majority of the people don't have access to the African People's Socialist Party. They don't have access to African internationalism. They are not necessarily dialectical and historical materialists. That they don't see things. And so for them, the urgency of the moment is not the same as it is for us. But we are faced with an urgent moment in history. And we have to help the people come into consciousness of their own reality and what it's going to take, what got us here and what it's going to take to get us out of here. We have to help the people come into the African People's Socialist Party, and people come to us, as you know, from 1,000 different places. We've opened up doors for from using various vehicles for the people to come, but people don't come ready-made revolutionaries. It takes at least 7 years, in my opinion, to develop cadre. Cadre development takes a period of time. But, if we are fortunate, if we get some of the best representatives of the class to come into this organization so that we can provide leadership for the vast majority of the people. African People's Socialist Party is a relatively small organization, but our influence is 1,000 times larger than the size of the party. I mean, when I say our influence, I don't mean this in some abstract way. I'm talking about the thousands of people who come through our furniture stores every day and they see our propaganda right there in front of their faces. They come to the store, their propaganda is right there because we recognize the relationship between the politics and the economics, because we recognize that politics is simply concentrated economics. And that's what you see when you come to our furniture. Thousands of people come to our marketplaces. Thousands of people experience Black Power Blueprint. Thousands of people actively, thousands, probably more than the organizational influence or strength of most organizations out in the world. And it's international. And we exist in various places around the world. And I've spoken too long, and I'd like to start a process now where people can engage in this discussion, and I hope that I left enough time to make it meaningful. Uhuru.
Uhuru, let's salute our leadership, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, for that powerful study. It is now time to open up with questions from our audience and online viewers. We want to appreciate everyone who's tuning in via Facebook and YouTube, and also appreciate all of our engagement. Please continue to invite your friends and family to this study and share widely on all of your social media platforms. So first I want to appreciate everyone who's watching. Just give a shout out to the different places that we have tuning in today. We have St. Petersburg, Florida, Chicago, Illinois, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Atlanta, Georgia, Houston, Texas, Kenya, Nova Scotia, Canada, New Mexico, Boston, Massachusetts, Toulouse, France, Mississippi, and Spain, New York. Yeah,
Where
New
in
York,
Spain?
New York.
Where in Spain?
It doesn't say.
Okay, go ahead. Spain. Go ahead.
New York, the Netherlands, and Jamaica.
Uhuru.
Uhuru. So our first comment comes from, excuse my pronunciation, Nto Pan-Africanista Lava Pies in Spain, is watching on YouTube and commented, Chairman, here in Spain, you have many supporters and we love you. We are learning a lot.
Is that Tio Tomas?
Wait, I can't tell.
Okay, I think I know who it is. Go ahead.
Then we have Olofin Akimba in St. Pete. He's viewing on Facebook and commented, explaining the crisis of imperialism is music to my ears. You cannot get this explanation of fascism anywhere else. Then we have, one second. Okay. David Tiboe, I hope I pronounced that, is viewing on Facebook and commented, Uhuru, power to the people. God bless the African People's Socialist Party. Peace, love, and health to you, brother, comrade Yeshitela. Your teachings have affected my family positively. This comrade is the only black leader who is speaking boldly about revolution. You are impacting lives in the UK. Uhuru. Right on. Next we have Adam Eterno viewing from the Netherlands on Facebook and says, a question to the Honorable Chairman. In this phase of resurgence/renewal of socialism worldwide, should the socialist movement, the African People's Socialist Party in particular, consider the current Russian state a partner? And if so, are the efforts being made to establish such a cooperation?
That's a good question. No, we don't consider the current Russian state a partner, but we do recognize the significance of what's happening with Russia in terms of its contention with the United States government, and we do recognize that it is possible to form alliance and relationships with movements in Russia. The growth of the influence of Russia in the world is part of the crisis of imperialism as it currently exists. Without Russia, Syria would have been wiped out by now by the United States government. And there are various other attacks on peoples around the world that would have been much more successful if Russia did not exist. In some ways, that's some similarities to the Soviet Union. And so we don't see Russia as a partner, which presupposes there's some existing relationship between the Russian state and our movement and our party. But I do want to say that U.S. imperialism is the strategic enemy of all the peoples on the planet Earth, and that we are not opposed to establishing relationships with political forces that are fighting against the United States if it's advantageous to the struggle to defeat imperialism. Let me just leave it there. Yeah, Uhuru. We don't consider Iranian state a partner, but Iran, again, is a challenge to U.S. hegemony in the Persian Gulf and around the world. And U.S., again, is a strategic enemy of everybody. So every struggle that we see happening on those fronts that undermine the strength and power and influence of the United States government is welcomed. We welcome that struggle. And our objective, of course, is the total liberation and unification of African people as a critical means by which capitalism will defeat it and real socialism and communism can come into the world again. And it needs to come into the world in Russia. And in order to come into the world in Russia, it's going to have to defeat the Russian capitalist state.
Next we have Sean Thomas on Facebook, who commented, "This is my college education from a real world professor." Uhuru, Sean. Right on. Just a second. Then we have Akile Anai, Director of Agitation and Propaganda for the African People's Socialist Party, candidate for St. Petersburg, Florida in District 7, is viewing on YouTube and commented, "Uhuru Chairman, does the question of reparations being discussed in the mainstream represent imperialism in crisis?"
Indeed. It is. It's imperialism in crisis. Because sometimes people think of imperialism, they think of boogeymans like Trump, Bush, or Republicans, or something to that effect. But the whole issue is something that permeates the entire system itself, and everybody that's influenced by imperialism. That's everybody inside the United States. And so the work that we started with the reparations issue some years ago, that is responsible, and I say without hesitation, responsible for the current open discussion happening around reparations today. When we started this work, this discussion, we were characterized as a lunatic fringe for even thinking that white people or white power should repay Africans for resources stolen from us and up until today. And the fact that they have to deal with this today is a real struggle by the bourgeoisie to capture leadership of this growing issue and that's unfolding before the world. Because if they can turn the reparations issue into a modern welfare or poverty program, then their objective is to prevent the mass of African people from recognizing that every refrigerator in every white world community in the world is filled with the food of black people, and every paved street and every drink of clean water comes as a consequence of what's been extorted and stolen. And every 401k and old people who are retiring to places in St. Petersburg, Florida, and white people in the rest of the world are coming at the expense of the life of people on the continent of Africa and Sierra Leone who have an average lifespan that's 37 years old. So if they can get in front of that demand and channel it into some kind of modern poverty program or welfare program, that's what they want. So the fact that in St. Petersburg, Florida, where Comrade Akile is calling from, there are people who, that we had the first reparations electoral campaign in history in the world in 2017, where hundreds of white people in a majority white city was marching behind Comrade Akile. They're going unity through reparations. That is what they want to prevent. They don't want us to control the question or the oppressed to be able to control the question. They will dominate and control the question and define the question for the oppressed. There's somebody at the door. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Okay, at this time I wanted to ask if anyone in our live audience has any questions they wanted to ask Chairman, any comments or anything? No?
The
Okay.
child.
So, did you have something?
All right, Uhuru Chairman.
Uhuru Comrades.
Yeah, thank you for the this political education, and definitely is exciting my imagination, and it's inspiring and informative in a real serious way. I got a lot of questions, but I'll just try to narrow it down to a couple. I wanted to know when we look at the, what people consider the political arena or the electoral process, and, public agencies, that kind of thing, if that is considered, that is part of the state apparatus. So, you talk about courts and police, but other social service agencies and the political arena proper part of that process. And also wanted to just get a sense of some of the ways in which you see the capitalist ruling class work through, specifically through neo-colonial heads of state, for example, in Africa, and other neo-colonial politicians in Africa, throughout Africa, to control the economy of Africa and that kind of thing. Uhuru.
Uhuru. First of all, yes, all of these agencies, they're part of the capitalist state apparatus, the arena. In fact, most of the human beings, like the little corrupt sellouts here in St. Louis and other places who occupy these spaces in government, they could disappear. And these agencies, these institutions that you're talking about represent the state apparatus that would keep the system moving and replace them, put them in with any other person. Trump has frustrated and messed that up a little bit on an international level. On a national level, but even that hasn't been effective because the state is so powerful that generally speaking, it captures whomever comes up into that thing. So yeah, that's a part of the state. The agencies, the social service agencies, are all of them function as an apparatus of the state, and the bourgeoisie. The electoral process is designed to capture all of that, to capture all of those means by which resources and influence it happens. And you can even say that about the school system is a part of the state apparatus. Regardless of the nice teacher you may have had in 5th grade, the school system itself is a part of that whole process connected to the state apparatus. And in terms of these neo-colonial puppet regimes all over the continent of Africa, and they are, I say Africa, but they're not just in Africa. They're throughout the Americas, as you know, and they are right here in St. Louis. They're in the various communities that we live in. These are some of the most vicious, most serious opportunists that you want to see. If we say that opportunism is defined as the ability to sacrifice the long-term interests of the working class for some short-term advantage or some advantage of the petty bourgeoisie, then it's clear that that's what neo-colonialism. Neo-colonialism is the highest expression. It sacrificed the long-term interests of our people for independence and control of our own economy for some short-term advantage that they, as sectors of the African population, can achieve for themselves. A sector of the African petty bourgeoisie, they, their wives, their ethnic group in some instances, can benefit, while all the rest of the African people, all the workers, all the peasants, and everybody else continue to live in this deep misery. They will allow a handful of Africans to become wealthy, to have Mercedes-Benz and Rolls-Royces and white wives and the whole array of things that's normally associated in this world as it exists today as being successful African colonial subjects. So they are very vicious, they're brutal. They open the door for all kinds of resources to leave Africa at the expense of the African masses ourselves. They don't even, they don't even effectively tax the looting process. They don't even tax the wealth that's coming from Africa to the benefit of even an African bourgeois state. They don't do any of that. They just open the door, and the capitalists take everything out. The bourgeoisie take everything out. White power continues, and now what they are doing is the contest that's highly understated. That's happening because China is making such an inroad in Africa, has made such an inroad in Africa, that is creating its own set, or attempting to create its own set of neo-colonial stooges who, being clever, they think by playing China against the US and sometimes going against the U.S. or British or French interests and trying to unite with China, because China will also offer resources. But in every instance, what they're doing is selling the resources and future of Africa to other sources and doing nothing to lead the people or to even project a decent quality future for African people and the masses of our people on the continent of Africa. They're vicious. And I say Africa again because that's how I was raised, but of course, that's everywhere we are. Uhuru. There's somebody else here too. Yeah.
Uhuru, Chairman, this is Penny, African People's Solidarity Committee under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. And I salute you, Chairman, and this incredible book, Vanguard, and this study today. And I just wanted to ask, I mean, first of all, I think that what is so exciting and brings so much exuberance is that you are the only one that shows how the crisis of imperialism is the direct result of the resistance of African and oppressed peoples around the world, and that this resistance is so profound and so deep that it's just destroyed all the cohesiveness that imperialism might have had in the past, and everything is up for grabs. And, you know, you're also saying that to go in to totally now overturn it, there has to be the party and the cadre and the strategy to do that. And I just wanted you to comment on how you see the near-term future and the deepening of this crisis over the next few years and the role of the party in that. Uhuru, thank you.
I think that's an extremely important question, and I think the future and the immediate future will be defined in part by our success in building the African Socialist International, which is to say the African People's Socialist Party writ large all over the world where African people exist. This is critical. This is the most important thing that can happen in the whole world today for all oppressed and exploited people, is to support the development of the African People's Socialist Party. Because the success of the African People's Socialist Party puts revolution on virtually every continent on the planet Earth. The success of the African People's Socialist Party, that is to say, to have cadre of African internationalists throughout Africa, throughout the Caribbean, throughout Europe, throughout the Americas, what have you, means that we can cut imperialism to its knees automatically. We can have just a general strike of Africans organized around the world into a single organization. Just the ability of we had talked about the African Internationalist Labor Union coming from the ASI, just going on strike, just black people all around the world with a single organization. We shut off every light in Europe. We'd shut off every resource, every computer would be shut down in the United States and the rest of it. So that's the critical thing that has to happen. We have to build the African People's Socialist Party worldwide. Second, that we have to do whatever is possible to support every effort by the colonized and oppressed peoples around the world, recognizing that even in other places around the world, the working class has to come to power. We talk about supporting Iraq, we do, in the struggle against the US. We talk about supporting opposing the war that the U.S. would initiate against the Soviet Union. We do. But we recognize that the real future is going to be determined first by the workers of the world, the workers and poor peasants coming to power. That there has to be the emergence of a class consciousness that recognizes that the class question is concentrated in the colonial question. It is the colonial issue that the entire social system rests upon throughout the world, but the workers, the oppressed peoples, and the exploited laborers of the world have to be able to see their interests as independent from the interests of the bourgeoisie, whether that's an Arab bourgeoisie or petty bourgeoisie, an African bourgeoisie or petty bourgeoisie, it doesn't matter. That the working class even leading the struggle in the African working class, leading the struggle for the national liberation of African people, will have to do so while recognizing what our own selfish interests are as a class that is struggling for national liberation. Uhuru. I think that's about it, isn't it?
Uhuru, because of time, we want everyone to know that if your question wasn't answered, one of our moderators will correspond with you and make sure that the chairman sees your question. This study was brought to you by the Department of Agitation and Propaganda, Winning the War of Ideas. For your worldwide revolutionary news and analysis, visit theburningspear.com. For Revolutionary Radio, dynamic shows and music by Africans all around the world, tune in to Black Power 96.3 FM, broadcasting out of St. Petersburg, Florida, and accessible via the Black Power 96 app for Apple and Android, or online at blackpower96.org. Did you unite with what you heard today and want to learn more about how you can get involved with the African People's Socialist Party? Visit apspuhuru.org for all information regarding how you can apply now. Join the Freedom Mass Choir and Band. Join the Freedom Mass Choir and Band. The Freedom Mass Choir and Band is an all-African community group of singers and instrumentalists that sing songs of resistance and revolution. Members are located throughout the United States and attend weekly rehearsals both in person and via live stream and video. Sign up by emailing blackpowerchoir@gmail.com or call 727-537-6736. Order your copy of Chairman Omali Yeshitela's latest book, Vanguard, The Advanced Detachment of the African Revolution, the Political Report to the 7th Congress at theburningspearmarketplace.com. Book Chairman Omali Yeshitela for the Vanguard 2019 International Speaking Tour by contacting info@omaliyeshitela.org or call 727-914-3621. Start planning now to attend African Liberation Day, a tradition of the African People's Socialist Party, May 25th through the 26th in Washington, D.C. The theme is Take Africa for Africans at Home and Abroad, Death to Imperialist White Power, and will include a march as well as presentations from Chairman Omali Yeshitela and ASI Secretary General Luwezi Kinshasa. For registration, lodging, and transportation information, visit alduhuru.org. Sign up for the Marcus Garvey Legacy Cruise. The Marcus Garvey Legacy Cruise is the annual fundraiser held to support the work of the African Socialist International. The African Socialist International is an organization made up of African people located virtually on every continent, dedicated to overturning the conditions faced by African people worldwide. This year's cruise will be taking place from December 14th to the 19th of 2019, and we'll be sailing on the Carnival Sunrise from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, staying overnight in Havana, Cuba, visiting Nassau, Bahamas. Staying overnight in Havana, Cuba, and visiting Nassau, Bahamas. Registration is now open and deposits can be made by calling the travel agent Linda Stern at 732-972-4171. If you want to further support the ASI and the Marcus Garvey Legacy Cruise, make a donation by visiting uhurulegacycruise.org. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Make sure you like and subscribe to the Burning Spear TV on YouTube and catch every episode of Omali Taught Me Sunday Study. Uhuru.
Uhuru. The revolution is real, it's live, and as some comrades say, it's lit, right? Lit.